This video is sponsored by World of Warships as well as World of Warships Legends and their newest, most perfect timed partnership with Warhammer 40,000. World of Warships is, of course, the free-to-play strategic naval combat game, and World of Warships Legends is now the console version of said game with new controls and adapted UI to make sure that the entire game plays, feels, sounds, and looks great on console as it does on PC. And now you can get into both with some cool new Imperial or Chaos flair. As you can see on the screen right now, there are two ships you can look at, both the Imperial and Chaos versions. Personally, of course, because I'm not an absolute heretic, I prefer the Imperial one. I love the quotes on the side as well as the purity seals, but the Chaos one does have like a Helldrake style to it. And I mean, if you're anyone who likes Khorne, well, it's pretty obvious. It also comes with custom captains as well as custom voice lines, which I was hearing plenty of during my first game with the Imperial ship as I was getting, but whether your chant is death to the heretic or blood for the blood god, you can join World of Warships free today by signing up with the description link and code. And if you do so on PC, you will gain 300 doubloons, 7 days premium time, 1 million credits, the premium ship, the Ishizuchi, oh boy. 3 of the Imperial Camo, Protector of Faith, and 3 of the Khorne Camo, the Primordial Annihilator. If you'd like to join on console, you'll be able to get the Tier 2 Premium Destroyer, the USS Smith, as well as 3 days of premium time and 75,000 credits. Link is in the description. Check it out. Thank you so much to World of Warships for sponsoring me again. And now let us continue with the video.
There is a phrase called a few bad apples, and a few bad apples is normally used to derive the idea that certain individuals in a group do not represent the entirety of the group. There are a couple bad people in here, but they are not representative of the whole. However, a lot of people forget that the main saying is actually a few bad apples spoil the bunch, which is actually a real thing, by the way. It turns out that when apples over-ripen or become spoiled, they produce ethylene. Now, ethylene is a natural ripening agent, and the more ripe or overripe that apple becomes, the more ripened and excessively ripened other apples around it become as well, which of course is just a constant snowball effect. The Last of Us 2 is a humongous basket, a gigantic basket of apples, and it has about 4, 5, 6 of these really bad apples way at the bottom. And even though there are so many beautiful pristine apples in this game, it is completely being spoiled and soiled by those 5 to 6 bad apples. This is also a game where opinions vary widely based on whether or not you've actually played it. If you only get the synopsis of specific parts, then yeah, you're probably gonna think this is the worst game ever made. Though as fun as it would be to have this Metacritic score above me really actually represent the game, it doesn't. It is not the best game ever made, it is not the worst game ever made, it is somewhere in between. It has a lot of good in it and a lot of bad in it. And I plan on doing the best I can to explain to you all the reasons for both in doing one of the only things that seems to be completely dead in 2020, actually playing a game before reviewing it. Obviously, I'm going to be going into spoilers, so, be warned. See, normally I try to illustrate my plot by going through multiple kind of segments. It's the only thing I remember back from school where you had a thesis at the end of the first paragraph in your 5-paragraph essay, and that thesis would call to points in paragraph 2, 3, and 4. And obviously, school wasn't really my thing. I became a YouTuber. Whoops. But this video is going to be a lot more rambly. It's really hard to illustrate all my points into a concise format, and I have so much I want to say about this damn game that I'm going to have to start doing a little bit of rambling in order to properly say what I want to say. So, with that being said, this is the last chance for spoilers. There's going to be big spoilers on both games. Get out if you haven't played them, or if you don't care, then whatever.
See, there's a sequel. Wasn't as good.
The number one best way to describe all the problems with The Last of Us 2 is pacing. Pacing and pacing again. Citizen Kane can be a garbage story if it's told incorrectly. How you tell a story is just as important as the story you are telling. The humorous part of this is that actually Last of Us 1 and 2 are both very simple stories that are not actually that difficult to understand. The first game centers around Joel, a kind of young father who loses his daughter in what might be one of the best opening scenes in video game history, in which after 20 years later, through the whole zombie apocalypse style setting, he meets up with Ellie, a young kind of spunky, is that the word? Immune teenager, and he is tasked with taking her across the country to deliver her to a science facility in which they can attempt to extract a cure from her. During this time, The Last of Us does this kind of character hopping style storytelling. You have your constant in this equation, Joel and Ellie, and Joel and Ellie are kind of morphed and formed depending on their interactions with all the other characters in the game. It starts off with Tess, an old colleague with Joel, or I guess a current colleague in that sense, and Tess, Joel, and Ellie all kind of move their way out to take her over to Colorado, and through this time you learn a little bit more about Joel's current predicament, a little bit more about his past. This of course ends with Tess's death that moves on to Joel, Ellie, and Bill. And Bill allows Joel to kind of see how he operates with different kinds of people. This shows a lot more about Ellie's character development as she constantly backtalks to Bill.
Hey! What'd I say to you when we walked down the steps? What'd I say?
I'm just fixing your stupid pile.
Don't touch. God damn it.
But it does develop a little bit of a humorous relationship between Joel and Ellie through Bill's situation. Moving on to past that, you then have Henry and Sam. And Henry and Sam brings a little bit more of the old world, pre-apocalypse world back into the game, where Henry and Joel kind of talk about the old world and how things used to be, kind of softening up Joel a little bit, while Ellie and Sam kind of talk a little bit to show a little more of their character as two young kids. Henry actually softens Joel's harder shell a lot more than you'd expect, which is why it's that much more heartbreaking when the two of them finally die. Next you've got Joel, Ellie, and Tommy. And Tommy is great because it adds a whole lot of backstory of pre-current time Joel, but also post-apocalypse time Joel. And the more important part is that Ellie figures out about Joel's daughter, which is a very important scene, which is probably my favorite scene in that entire game.
Maria told me about Sarah.
Ellie?
And
You are treading on some mighty thin ice here.
And it shows off not only Ellie's unwillingness to leave as she's tired of ping-ponging between people, but Joel's originally very hard crust and anger as a man slowly starting to melting as he feels guilt for tossing Ellie away. After that, you have a little bit of just Joel and Ellie as they go through a college, but that's mainly led up to the Ellie and David sections, where David is, of course, a little bit of a touchy. This shows just the sheer length Joel will go to try to get back to Ellie and how much he's warmed up to her. And not only that, but after a little bit of kind of trauma bonding, I suppose, you finally have Ellie really come in as Joel's daughter for the first time in the game. After the trauma is resolved and we're at the end of the game, Joel realizes that the surgery for Ellie will of course kill her. And this comes to the point where Joel kills slaughters an entire base of Fireflies, including the doctor who is going to perform the surgery, to take Ellie away so he doesn't lose his last daughter, or his new daughter, for instance. What makes this so good is that you don't have to agree with what he did. The thing is that, sure, maybe they won't be able to make a cure from Ellie. That's always a possibility. Maybe the Fireflies are a bit inept, but that stuff was always just semantics. That didn't matter. The point was that even though the just loss of human life in general that made Joel's act so monstrous, it doesn't matter if you agree with him or not. What matters is that you believe he would do it. That's the most important part, is believing Joel would do that act. So at the end of the game, you get a conflicting, somewhat melancholy ending. Joel lies about what he did. Ellie kind of reluctantly accepts it, and then the game is over. And it's a wonderful ending that stands on its own, and even this game, with all of its faults, will not ruin how good the first Last of Us game is. What made it so good was that style of storytelling. Joel and Ellie were your constants. They moved through all these different characters, and each character would have its own reason to help either soften Joel or increase the relationship between the two of them. Joel starts off as a bitter old man who's just done with the world, and then he does an absolutely monstrous act to save the only person he cares about. It's not new. It's not breaking new ground. It's nothing unique, but what makes it so good is the sheer volume of storytelling, S-tier script writing, amazing voice acting, the pacing, all the characters, it's all fantastic. And then Senator Abby Armstrong hits a Joel in one within the first 2 hours of the fucking game. And it rightfully pissed me off. Fuck! So I'm going to go against the grain with this one. I honestly think The Last of Us 2 has a fantastic story buried under massive pacing issues and inconsistency. I think Ellie is a great character, as she was in the first, not quite as good, but still great. And I honestly really think Abby is a fine character, a very interesting and fleshed out character, but was all fleshed out way too late or at the wrong times. So here's my theory. There's this intern, right, carrying coffee and a screenplay for The Last of Us 2. And then, boom, power surge. All the computers go out. Big electrical shot. Everything is totally fried. The money spent on putting that screenplay into the cloud or on backups spent on the CEO's paychecks. All of the employees freak out. That intern carrying the last remaining screenplay of The Last of Us 2. They stand up and their knees immediately buckle. 80 hours a week of crunch time, no food, no water, no sleep. They cry out at that intern with the coffee, but they cannot be heard as their voices are too frail. The intern trips on his 15-year-old sneakers. Unpaid intern. Forgot to mention. The coffee spills all over the page numbers of The Last of Us 2 script. He freaks out. He thinks, oh my god, my career is ruined, as he quickly shuffles all the papers back together. What goes here? All of Abby's flashbacks were at the exact same time, right? Joel's in the beginning, I think. Bigot sandwich. I thought that was an outtake. Shit. He puts it all back together and he hands it directly to the boardroom of conference members. And that's how we got The Last of Us 2 script. Nothing in this game feels in order. Joel is clubbed to death within the first 2 hours of the game, and we've seen him twice. Once in a flashback that starts in the beginning, and once right before his clubbing. He is only mentioned in passing before his horrendous demise, and if you had quit right after his death, I wouldn't have blamed you. It is so brutal, unforgiving, and absolutely lacking any tact. This, of course, was for shock value, but the entire writing of this game, the reason they did this is so blatantly obvious. You take a beloved character and you kill them off really, really early in a jarring, brutal scene. So you, as a character, are completely for Ellie's crusade of death. You want her to murder the hell out of everybody. Then you flesh out the villain, you flesh out all the villain's friends, and then with all of that, you start to think, oh hey, maybe we shouldn't be going on this crusade of death. And then when you go back to Ellie, you're kind of thinking to yourself, oh no, Ellie, stop, this is wrong, I was wrong, revenge is bad. And that's the overall moral of the story. Revenge is bad and it hurts the people around you. It's a very basic idea and plot, but I can't say that's a bad thing because then I'd be a hypocrite as I was just praising the first Last of Us for its very basic and simple plot. The issue is that it is just pounded into your brain why this revenge crusade is bad over and over and over again, and it is padded out excessively. The game is extremely long at 20 to 25 hours. The first Last of Us game, it only took me 10 hours to beat. Now I go a little bit faster than the average person, but this game is double the length. And each theme in the first Last of Us was individual to the characters as well. This one, it is revenge is bad and hurts the people around you over and over and over again. And then even that is stretched with these extremely long, drawn-out scenes of collecting items, reading a million notes, looking for safe combinations, or even just walking around trying to figure your way around a puzzle. The phrase, I guess we can't go that way, gotta find another way around, might as well have been the tagline for this game. Which brings me to the way the game is structured. Now we're gonna get a little bit more into the things that I actually liked about the game. One, gameplay is solid, which is a little bit unfortunate that it's actually being pushed down so far. I feel like a lot of people say like, oh, the gameplay doesn't matter if the story's pretty good, and that is true, but I do feel like that just completely dismissing the gameplay is a little bit unfair, as that's the thing you'll be doing the most. Now, I'm sick and tired of the amount of collecting notes and walking around stuff that there was, but the actual fighting gameplay, when you get into it, still really good. I love the Last of Us 1 feel because it's basically the exact same game, but I'd say improved. It has the same heftiness and weight to melee attacks and shooting. All the environment looks great. The animations are extremely well done. I also think they actually upped it a little bit since the first game, considering that it's basically the exact same combat system, but with some more interesting infected, some more interesting enemies, and also a little bit more variety on how you handle your situations. I like the fact that WLF have a lot more of a militaristic strategy. They all have a lot more guns. They throw grenades at you. They've got attack dogs. dogs, which is very interesting. And the Scars group is much more tribal, using things like arrows that debilitate you. They're also much more sneaky, and they have very gigantic actual humans with these huge melee weapons that are pretty scary to deal with. This translates over to visuals. Seattle looks incredible. In fact, I think if it wasn't for the fact that I stayed there for a little bit too long, I'd say it's my favorite place out of either of the games. The thing that the first Last of Us had over this one is that you traveled across the country, so there's a lot more locations to go to, whereas in this Last of Us, you mainly just stay in Seattle, but even so, it looked so good. The animations and lip sync and some of the violence is just as brutal and difficult to watch as it used to be. The script is amazing. I think the dialogue between characters is fantastic. The voice actors still bring an S-tier performance across the way. Laura Bailey, Troy Baker, Ashley Johnson, are you kidding me? Going back on that, the music is top tier. The cinematography too is great. There's this wonderful scene, one of my favorite parts in the game, where Ellie comes back from doing some less than favorable things, and she takes her shirt off. She's lying on the bed, or she's sitting on the bed, and her back is just ruined, and it really reflects not only her mental but just physical pain that she's not only feeling, but just like it's all crushing down on her at one time, and you can really tell that this character isn't going to stop, but you kind of want her to in a weird way. And that's where the game shines. All of those individual scenes are great. All the facets of those scenes are great, but the reason this video is called A Few Bad Apples Ruin the Bunch is because the times where they're not, it ruins all of those individual parts, because the way it's mished up, the way certain parts go in other areas that make no sense, and this should have been here, and I can't sympathize with this character because I killed him off 8 hours ago, is where all the big problems really start to arise. See, I think a lot of people would have really liked Abby's story because it made sense. It's two sides of the exact same coin. Abby has her father murdered by Joel, so she's fixated by revenge, and through her overzealous need for it, she goes over to Joel, kills him, and because of that, Ellie kills all of her friends. Revenge hurts you and those around you. Ellie loses her father figure from Abby, and so she goes out on a giant revenge quest to kill Abby and all of her friends, and her friends are either gravely wounded or killed due to that exact crusade. They're both the exact same story, just on two different sides. The problem is just how it's told. Abby is a fine character on paper. Her motivations make sense. But why in the ever-loving hell would you give me her entire backstory 10 hours after clubbing the most loved character from the first game and then shooting another character that I just spent a good 8 hours of revenge questing with? And then you make me play as her for 5 to 6 hours to understand her backstory. At that point, you've already made her so hateable. You've already made her such a blight because of what she's done that it's too little too late. Like, yes, now, after a little bit of time digesting, I get it, but why was it placed there? Why aren't her scenes after Joel's death? Better yet, why isn't the game opening with her? Why didn't the game open with her and her father, and then her father dies, and she's extremely angry, and you understand what's going on, and it provides this sense of dread, because you know why she's here, and you know why she's gonna kill him. Why was it not in the beginning to at least prepare us for this kind of thing? It can still be shocking. It can still be shocking. I know that's the reason why you wanted to do that, but she should have had all this explained earlier, because then I wouldn't have hated her guts. Why are you fleshing out all of these characters, her friends, like 8 hours after they've already died on screen? Yeah, you know what? When Abby came back to see Owen and Mel dead on the ground, yeah, I was sad for them. I bet I would have been a hell of a lot sadder if I knew about them before I murdered them 6 hours prior. You know what Spec Ops: The Line did beautifully? When they wanted you to feel like shit, when they wanted you to feel like an absolute piece of trash, they either did it immediately after, or during the period of time. You either did something and realized the horrible thing you did the moment after, or during the entire situation. I didn't have to retroactively look at it 6 hours later. I knew I was a piece of shit immediately. Oh god, and don't even get me started on the false marketing that this game had.
What the hell are you doing here?
You think I'd let you do this on your own?
What the hell are you doing here?
I think I'd let you do this on your own.
Speaking of Jesse, the amount of deaths this game just brushes by really upset me. My man crush this game was Jesse. I loved Jesse. Jesse was such an interesting character. I love his VA, by the way. It's super good, but I was really getting to know him a little bit more, you know, relationship with Dina prior, and then the whole pregnancy thing. It's obviously his kid, there's that whole thing, and he finds out that she's pregnant, there's all these kinds of things, and then just bang, dead. He gets headshot immediately, no warning, no death, and it's forgotten about. There's a Spanish-speaking character that was with Abby that gets shot in the back of the head by Tommy, and he's literally forgotten about immediately. No crying, no death scene. In fact, there are no death scenes besides one character. Everyone else just dies. There's Yara, this young Scar girl who's trying to get away from the Scars. She, after all this time spent trying to save her, gets shot on the ground. Then this guy called Isaac. Oh yeah, he's this crazy leader of the WLF. He arrives, and then Yara shoots him, and then they shoot Yara, and then there's just 2 deaths, and then Abby runs away, and no one talks about it. Those aren't death scenes. Remember Tess and her whole emotional speech about being bitten? Remember Sam and Henry and the gut-wrenching scene about them dying? Hell, even David had a little bit of a spotlight before he became a stab light. It's hard to get with the revenge is bad and hurts everyone around you when not even the characters that are with them have enough time to reflect on them dying or being hurt. Okay, let's talk about Abby a bit. I'm sorry I told you I was going to ramble, and I'm doing that now. Abby's a fine character. I've said it a million times. I'll say it again. She's fine. It's how she's told that's bad. Besides the fact that she looks like she can power lift a semi, which I don't really care about. I know some people take some problem with that because it's unrealistic, but Joel's pushing 60 and he's like penta-killing dudes that are 20 years old, so realism, whatever. Her as a character actually does get fleshed out a decent bit. I liked her backstory. I thought her whole dad thing was genuinely tragic, and I really enjoyed all the scenes with her and Owen and their prior relationship. I thought that was very cute. It was actually a little sweet seeing that thing, and I actually thought her little fear of heights was played pretty well. It was played for laughs a couple of times, but it actually kind of gave her a little bit more humanity besides being just this giant beef stick. She even has an arc where she originally was with the WLF and she actually betrays them and risks her own life to save 2 defect Scar kids, which is very impressive and something that you wouldn't really expect because the younger kid, the boy, Lev, is like the pure character. They have been thrust with all these horrible things against them, but they themselves are mostly pure of heart and have no real major flaws, and they're not consumed by revenge like the rest of the main cast. In fact, during the main boss fight between her and Ellie, you actually play as her during the boss fight. This is something that I actually thought was pretty impressive storytelling because the fight is almost identical to the fight with David and Ellie in the first game, where David was a predator both metaphorically and literally. Ellie has now become the predator. She's so consumed by this all-encompassing rage that you're the one who actually has to run away from her. You're this gigantic, insanely built girl, and you have to flee from Ellie because she's just so maniacally rage-filled against you. In fact, after the end of that whole fight, after this a whole bunch of brutal back and forth where you honestly don't know who's gonna die, Abby is basically right there ready to kill Dina, but the one character, the pure character, Lev, talks her out of it. Abby has stopped being consumed by rage, unlike Ellie, and she goes her separate way. She leaves because she's had that one character to be able to sway her. That was the whole interaction, and honestly, I liked it. I think that's one of the better parts of the game is that whole fight. I think what they were going for made a lot of sense, in a vacuum, of course, without the fact that it was bounced around with all these other issues and flashbacks and we had to wait 5 hours to get to that fight scene. This storyline for Abby would have been great if it wasn't, after 6 hours of playing her backstory, right after shooting Jesse in the face and 15 hours after killing Joel. It is the equivalent of ending your show on a cliffhanger and then having the entire other season be about the backstory of the villain until the final episode where you finally resolve the season finale of the prior season. It's very Walking Dead-esque. Oh god, the flashbacks. Don't even give me a star on the flashbacks. Some of these flashbacks are great, but the main question, the Joel lie, is presented and found out in a flashback extremely quickly. Ellie is just like, oh, heard of her, I'm gonna go to the hospital. Whoa, Joel, you lied, wow. And then it's just resolved, and that's about it. It plays into the game slightly later, but barely. Actually, no, it plays into the game in the beginning. Would have been nice if that was before the scene, huh? See, it's too bad too, because some of those are great. I could walk in that museum scene for hours. That scene where they're in the landing pod, so good. So good. Heartfelt, cute, well-made, great cinematography, great voice acting, incredible. It makes me even more angry about Joel's death because you see Troy Baker at his finest, one of his best roles, the S-tier dialogue, the S-tier voice acting. And it's all in service of just flashback. Pacing, pacing, pacing. And I want to talk about the most egregious example of pacing problems, the ending. The last 2 hours of this game's ending is, in my opinion, laughable. It is a side mission that is entirely meant to pad the runtime, and it has almost no point to it whatsoever. There's a part after the big theater showdown where they go to a farm, and then after the farm, Ellie goes to California to hunt down Abby. This entire scene is just a rehash of the original game's ending as well. You fight a random, no-named California group that has slaves, I guess, where Abby is captured by them and then tied up to a pole along with Lev off camera, and during this entire period of time you are in this gigantic fight as Ellie that is entirely meant to be the Firefly base. Joel gets an automatic weapon, Ellie gets an automatic weapon, you both fight a ton of humans at the same time, and they both have armor for the first time in the game. It's a complete retrim. And at the end, Ellie goes to Abby and Lev, cuts them down, lets them go, decides she doesn't want to let them go anymore, beats the shit out of them, almost kills her, decides not to kill her, and then she lets them go. And then she goes back to her house, and Dina and the kid left her because she went on her vengeance crusade and she can't play guitar anymore because Abby bit off her fingers. It is the definition of excessive. There is no point for it to be there. There's no message, there's no moral. I understand, revenge is bad and it hurts everybody around you. Why did you do it again? I understood the point, I got it. In fact, at that point, I didn't want Abby to die. That's the thing that a lot of people I noticed who didn't play the game had in their head, is they hear that Abby killed Joel, Ellie let Abby go at end of game. And when you read those two things, you think, oh god, that's terrible. But for me, no, I was like, no, don't kill Abby. This is excessive. This is stupid. Why are we even here? There's no point to be here. This is dumb. I didn't want Ellie to kill Abby because it served no purpose. It served no point. The game had already ended. After he took enough time, I thought that it was fine to let her out because she kind of got away. She showed mercy. She had the pure kid. It was okay. And then they had the QuickTime boss fight, which I think was them trying to recapture the glory of the Uncharted 4 QuickTime event boss fight, which was not only miles better, but was fun, served a purpose, and it didn't feel like it was just getting padded for the rest of the game. I actually really liked that boss fight, and this one just felt like a slog. I was there spamming square, wondering why am I even doing this? This feels excessive. That's what the ending should have been. Big theater fight with Abby and Ellie. Giant theater fight. Ellie gets her fingers bit off just during that fight. That's where it is now. Fight ends. Abby shows mercy. Lev, the whole deal. Go to the farm. At the farm, Ellie is with Dina and with their little baby kid, the Jesse kid, right? Dina's all fucked up. Ellie's all fucked up. Tommy's there, also all fucked up. He's still very angry, wants to go after Abby. Ellie says no, which is what she said to begin with, but then she did it anyway. Ellie says, no, I'm not for that anymore. I'm done with that. Tommy is understandably pissed off. He leaves. Ellie still has all these nightmares about Joel. She still feels kind of bad about it, and she still has this little bit of vengeance, but she's kind of holding it down and keeping it in. Abby is going with Lev to Santa Barbara. She goes to try to find the Fireflies. Ain't no Fireflies. They're literally all dead. It's a complete dead end. So her and Lev go back to the boat, and they try to think, what the hell are we going to do now? We're trapped. We have nothing. We have nowhere to go. Ellie tries to play guitar. Can't because her fingers are off, losing the only thing that Joel taught her at the end, which is a nice solidification of that revenge story and what you lose from it. Fade to black ending. Because it has that same melancholy ending of The Last of Us 1. The Last of Us 1 had a conflicting, difficult ending, but our heroes still got out. And while it still made you kind of go, I don't know about this, it was still clean. Ellie is still fucked up, lost her fingers, but she still has her wife. She still has her kid. Tommy's angry, but that's it. They both get away, but they're still they're very, very messed up. All of Abby's friends are dead. Most of Ellie's friends are dead or messed up somehow. You leave it like that. It ends on that melancholy note. I would have liked that a lot more. I'm pretty sure you could kind of cut that up to maybe make it that way. I don't know. Actually, here, me, Bricky, a man with no writing or game design experience whatsoever, is now going to attempt to tell you how this game should have gone instead. This game should have been a goddamn trilogy. The first game is about 10 hours. This game's like 20 something. You split that in half. Maybe you make it like 12 hours each. The second game, simple. You do all the flashback stuff that you did in this game specifically. All the flashback with Joel and Ellie, you do all of that. You introduce Abby as a character. You introduce her motivation, and you keep fleshing her out more and more and more with her, Owen, and all the people around her in the WLF. Then, as the time goes on, you have the theme of your actions have consequences. Instead of revenge, it's about your actions have consequences. The characters you meet, the people you interact with, both on Abby and Ellie's side, will have that common theme perpetrating through it. Now, we all know Joel was going to die. You knew that his time was ticking. It's like Thane Krios in Mass Effect 2. He states that he has a heavy illness and he will die soon. So you know he's going to die in Mass Effect 3. The question is how? You get more time with Joel and Ellie. You get more of that storyline of her finding out what Joel did. And then as you continue, you maybe sort of start to forgive him for his actions. And all that time, Abby is just consumed by this rage, and you end the game with Joel's death. It'll be shocking, it'll be painful, and it'll be a cliffhanger. Third game would be the revenge story. The third game would be the revenge story, and now all of Abby's motivations are fleshed out. All of Abby's friends are fleshed out as well. Jesse and Dina are fully fleshed out, and therefore when their deaths come in the revenge story, they have weight, they feel good, or sad, and it can really push home that revenge hurts those around you story that much more. That's how I feel like it should have been. It should have been a trilogy. You could shorten all that padding out of the finding different like safe codes and getting around barriers and stuff that you see in the game. You'd have your own morals for both games, and it would have made, I think, a lot more sense than what we currently had. Hell, I bet if you could mod the game somehow, screw with the chapter selection, find a way to splice it up so that the flashbacks come at different points and you can extend certain areas here and there. You can change around the pacing. I bet this game would go up a whole point. There are still plenty of problems even if you did do that, but hey, I bet it would help it. I am sorry that I dragged on so long for this video. There are so many emotions I needed to unpack and so many things I needed to state. I'm sorry if it was just a giant jumbled mess, but The Last of Us 1 is one of my top 5 games of all time. This game, it doesn't hold a candle to it. It's not a bad game. It's not a great game. It has a lot of good in it. And in fact, I'd say it has way more good than bad. But that bad, few bad apples. So funny though. I nearly shed a single manly tear during this game. I almost did. Near the end, in fact, way in the end, there was a scene with Joel on his porch, and Ellie was going up to him after the dance, or the dance party scene, which also should have been way in the beginning of the game as well. I don't know why that was at the end. And she made the statement that I can never forgive you for what you did, because Joel said the most metal thing I've ever heard someone say.
If
If somehow the Lord gave me a second chance at that moment, I would do it all over again.
But she said she can't forgive you, but
But I would like to try.
I'd like that.
and you just saw in Joel's face just immediately starts welling up with tears. And you can see this like a grown, what gets me? A grown man holding back emotion. Oh my God. The idea that she would even try to forgive him was the happiest thing he had ever heard. And God, how I fucking wish that scene was in the beginning of the goddamn game. Thank you all so much for watching my Last of Us 2 video. It was a pleasure having you here. I'm sorry for the rambling, of course. To all of my patrons on the $10 tier and up, your names are scrolling along through here. Your support is absolutely incredible, and I love you guys for doing this, allowing me to make these videos. Check out World of Warships, our sponsor for today as well, if you want to cop some of those 40K ships, because I thought that was a pretty good crossover especially. And for the top tier patrons today, we've got Max Gross Handler, good old Jack Slim, Drunken Legends, Big Papa Nergs, and Krieg the Psycho. The 5 of you are on my top tier of the patronage, and honestly, you guys do more than I could ever ask for. Thank you so much for helping me do what I do. You're all freaking badass, and I'm sure I'll speak to you very soon. Thank you all for watching. My name has been Bricky. I love you, and we'll talk about better things next time. Bye-bye.